All righty, my clock says it's top of the hour, so let's get started. Welcome everyone. Happy Pi Day. I just noticed that as well. March 14th. For those of us who are math nerds, happy Pi Day. For those of you who I have not met, my name is Eisha Armstrong, and I'm the co-founder and executive chairman here at Vectorus. And I'm really excited today to give you the sneak peek at some of the findings that will be in our upcoming book that's going to be published later this spring, knock on wood. It focuses on a very important problem, which is commercializing or going to market with our new products. And how do we develop go-to-market strategies that ensure that our new products and solutions launch successfully and we get a quick time to revenue. So we've got about an hour today, and I'll be sharing a little bit of background on why we chose this topic for our next area of research, and also what are some of the big key findings thus far. I'll end with a little bit of an invitation to get in touch if you have an interesting perspective or tactic that you'd like to share as we're putting the final touches on the manuscript, as well as an invitation to join some go-to-market leaders who are specifically focused on go-to-market motions at their organizations. So again, welcome. We've got about an hour. We're going to hold Q&A until the end. So if you have questions, just put them in the chat, and my colleague Molly Connolly, who is on the line, she will let us know when we get to questions, what the questions are. So with that, let's get started. I want to start with some benchmarking data. So here are some key findings from our 2024 productization benchmarking survey that we just completed. This was a survey that we did of leaders who are all executives of B2B professional services firms, predominantly C-suite executives, product leaders, across several different what we call productization lifecycle phases or maturities, but all from B2B professional services. And we asked respondents what market trends are driving their productization efforts. And what we found is that productization is motivated equally both by AI and other technologies. You can see that is the bar chart or bar line there on the far left, as well as changing client or customer expectations. Both of those at 51%, and a close third is increased competition. And we found this data to really affirm something that we've been hearing in multiple panels that we've run with B2B professional services executives who are looking to productize, notably that they're all approaching Gen AI in particular with an eye on how it can better support a better customer experience. And I thought this was an interesting way to just kind of start off and kind of why are we even thinking about productization? What is particularly driving it? Now let's take a look at the internal goals that we're hoping to achieve with productization. And you can see that here on the next slide. So far left with the 57% recurring revenue. So getting some of that lovely recurring revenue, number one there, followed closely by improved gross margin, that scalability that we get, especially when we tech enable delivery of our services, do things in a more scalable fashion. So this is some of the why organizations are pursuing productization. And then we also asked about what are some of the key challenges that you're facing. And this is what really leads us to today's topic. So I know this is a bit of an eye chart. There's a lot of information here on the slide. What we've highlighted at the top are the three things that were most often cited as difficult or very difficult. Those are number one, moving faster with development and launch of new products. Two, setting the right sales strategy, structure, and incentives. And then three, reducing the amount of customization that we do for customers. So certainly a lot to unpack here, but we were very So pleased to see that the number 2 challenge is the focus of this new area of research, setting the right sales strategy, structure, and incentives. At least it's part of what we're researching as part of this new book that we've been working on. And I think it's it lines up pretty well with what I hear from executives. So common stall point I hear is that we've developed a great product. We know that there's a validated market need, but for some reason, we're just not getting the revenue impact that we thought we would get. And there are a lot of reasons why that might be, and we'll unpack some of those today. It could be that we don't have the right capabilities internally to sell a new product. It could be that we are selling to a new market segment that we've never sold into before. It could be that we're thinking about pricing and packaging too narrowly. Lots of different reasons there, but very, very common challenge that we see. And often the way that this challenge shows up are in questions. So these are questions that I and our product coaches on our team get a lot, and ones that we kept hearing over and over again and decided to go ahead and commission this new research. But there are things like, what changes can I make to improve renewability when I create my go-to-market strategy? That's there in the upper right-hand side. Going clockwise, what exactly or who exactly is going to be responsible for the go-to-market strategy of our new products? Is it the head of product? Is it our chief marketing officer, if we happen to have one? Is it the head of sales? Who actually owns the go-to-market strategy? Going around to the lower left, how do I price and package services and products to minimize the risk of cannibalization? And usually when we get this question, they're talking about cannibalization of services revenue while maximizing the opportunity that they may have with products. And then finally there in the upper left, how much exactly should I be investing in sales and marketing, especially at different product stages? So when a product is just being launched, what's the appropriate amount of investment to expect versus as you're proving out product market fit, and then as you go into growth stage? So these are all some of the questions that we get from the executives that we're working with, and areas where it certainly spurred us to decide to do more research. So you can see Launch Boldly will be coming out again later this spring. And it expands on some of the initial information that we included in our first book, Productize, around how to do that go-to-market phase. But this entire book will be devoted looking at this problem of how do we get these new offerings to revenue impact and to as much revenue as possible quickly and efficiently. Our goal is to dive into practical tactics, again, that B2B professional services firms have used to create go-to-market plans, hire and develop product sales teams, manage that inherent misalignment that may exist with legacy services, selling motions, and things like that. And we'll be answering questions like, how do we design a sales organization? How do you align sales and marketing for products? How do you partner with the leadership team when you've got blended sales, products, businesses? How to determine your ideal client profile, getting the right packaging, pricing, certainly commercial metrics, and all of those things. And we do believe that it is a gap in the marketplace. And again, that's why we decided to devote some effort here. So this page is kind of our representation of where we think the current landscape is in advice or research on how most effectively to bring new products and services to market. So you can see here on the far left-hand side, certainly there's a lot of resources that are out there that help with sales training and development, especially a lot about how do you do product sales. Those tend to be, however, geared most toward tech native organizations, and focus on the methodology and the how. So that's, I think, certainly an area that there's a lot of information on, a lot of general sales frameworks. We are not covering that in this research. For our right-hand side, there's also a lot of information about how to do product development well. Certainly a lot about how you can do design sprints, develop MVPs, how you can develop a product that scales, has real market demand, how to do agile well, lots of information about that. But we do think that there's a gap, again, in the research and the advice that's out there on how to commercialize new products, especially when you're in a services first environment. And you're not starting in a product or tech native environment. So those questions that are on the page, I think, are ones that are worthy of answering. And again, our goal with this research is really to give practical tactics that services firm leaders can use to create their go-to-market plans, hire and develop their product sales teams, and really manage that inherent misalignment that I talked about when you have both services and products. So this is a lot of the why we did the research. Now let's dive into why this is hard for a lot of organizations. So again, what we tend to hear is we had a great product idea, but for some reason, the launch was a failure and we're not meeting our expectations or the goals that we set out. Now again, this assumes that there was good market research done up front about understanding customer segments, customer needs, requirements, and so on. And when we dug into this, we found there were a couple of common mistakes that organizations are making. So the first one is that commercialization really was an afterthought. It was taking a back seat to product development. And I think part of that is because there are some organizations that don't fully grasp the importance of developing a go-to-market strategy and adequately investing in the capabilities to execute that strategy. They start first with the product. If we build it, they will come. And that is a philosophy that certainly is out there. There are a lot of successful product first tech native companies that have had a lot of success with that market, with that strategy. But I think it's a very dangerous one, especially if you're starting with a services first organization, to not give as much thought to how you're going to commercialize your product as how you're going to develop your product. You know, it's interesting. I was talking to one chief revenue officer of a B2B services firm that recently failed in their productization efforts. And she shared with me, I'll read you this quote, there was this assumption that we could just hand the new product over to the sales team and they would sell it because it was new and it was exciting. But that's not the way that it worked. There has to be a strategy about who we're selling to, the pricing, the packaging, how we'll generate leads, and what skills do we need to sell. And developing that go-to-market strategy should have started at the same time that we began developing the new product. I just thought that was such a succinct way to talk about this issue. And in fact, we see it in the business cases that we review from a lot of organizations when they're putting together the business case about the product. They include all of the costs to develop it, but massively tend to underestimate or even exclude what the go-to-market costs are going to be to generate the leads, to sell the product, and even to service and renew it. So, I think in retrospect and being a little reflective here, we are somewhat to blame for this. So I mentioned, we had a chapter about go-to-market and commercialization in the first book, Productize. But it was only one chapter. And we certainly talk about the market research that needs to happen in order to develop a strong product and then how that later dovetails into your go-to-market plan. But I think the way that we positioned it as, it's one step in the process and it's executed after you've developed the product as opposed to alongside it. So certainly want to take some responsibility here for this mistake. The second mistake that we saw in the research is thinking too narrowly about go-to-market requirements. So typically, when I use this term go-to-market, I'm meaning two things. So one, I'm talking about what is the strategy, but also what are the capabilities to implement that strategy. And unfortunately, I think a lot of companies don't think most comprehensively about what's going to be needed. And in fact, we often see leaders confuse go-to-market strategy with something like sales headcount. But obviously, it is so much more than that. And it'll include a whole ecosystem of activities, from defining your market, creating your marketing strategy, and determining how to generate leads to building sales collateral, sales compensation, and so on. So it's not the things that you see there on the right-hand side of the page. It is not just a list of marketing campaigns. Sometimes I do see that. It is not just a list of target customers, and certainly it's not sales headcount. So we'll get more into what it is, but again, I think thinking too narrowly about the requirements is a common mistake. Third one that we see is using or expecting to use the same go-to-market motions for products that have been used for services. So certainly for those of you who know, when you're selling services, it is a lot about, one, understanding what are the needs of the customer that you're talking to, diagnosing those, showing empathy that you understand those, and so on, and then inspiring confidence that the people in your organization can meet those needs. So very focused on people and being able to do kind of whatever the customer needs, or as one client called it, selling yes as a service. That's how he defined what you're doing on the left-hand side. But a service that has been productized has to be positioned as the best packaging of features, typically for a set price or a price schedule, to meet the common needs of a customer segment. And that is very, very different. It not only means, as we'll talk about in a little bit, that you need different sales skills, but you also need to think differently about your marketing and your messaging. It's not just about kind of brand awareness and showcasing the expertise of your professionals or in your organization, but demonstrating how the features of your particular productized service gives the benefits that they need. It also means persuading the customer that you understand what they need, even more so than they may understand it. Because again, you're meeting a common need as opposed to a specific individual need of an entire segment. And certainly there may be, and there should be economic benefit of that. So as you're thinking about pricing and packaging, also talking about the economic benefit of a more scalable approach is important. And then just to give you a sense of kind of where we're going with the research, and I mentioned this earlier, we are focused on an entire ecosystem of go-to-market. So it will include, how does the organization understand customer needs by segments and understand the competitive environment? Does the organization have the processes and the skills to continually discover new market insights to inform both product and go-to-market strategies? So that's everything that you see there under market understanding. Then we cover business modeling. So can the organization translate market understanding into a compelling business model that includes economically attractive product pricing, product packaging, and customer acquisition strategies? Then we get into marketing. So developing compelling messaging, communicating those messages using different marketing channels, and generating the volume of leads necessary to meet your revenue targets. Fourth, sales. Does the organization have a sales channel and sales process? Do you have the skills to sell the new product? Who are you selling to and how? And then finally, renewability. Has the organization planned for account growth and product renewability. So all of those we're addressing in this new research. So what were some of the key findings? Probably why you decided to join today. Would love to get, again, a sneak peek at some of the key findings. So the first one is that successful go-to-market commercialization is an iterative process. In the book, we are going to talk about the right amount of investment at each level of product maturity. So as you're recruiting your first users, what do you need to be thinking about in terms of your commercialization strategy? As you have your first paid customers, how does that commercialization strategy evolve? As you determine that you have product market fit and are trying to determine whether or not you have go-to-market fit, how does the strategy evolve? And then finally, once you get to scale, what are you doing? So in the first phases, very early phases, you're still testing your hypotheses about the customer problems that you had when you designed the product. Then you are testing your hypotheses about the ideal client profile and the market segment, and then the pricing and the packaging and the customer buyer journey. You're testing hypotheses about how best to generate leads, the best sales channels, the renewability of the product. And as you validate those hypotheses, you invest more. So that means that we're not building up or standing up a mature team on day one, or should we even have a year-long marketing plan? So for example, one of the organizations that we profile in the research decided with their product that it was best targeted for larger companies who already have a team in place that could use the product. So actually more mature companies than they had been working with before, had a team in place, and they could do it themselves. But one of the things they wanted to make sure is that they didn't cannibalize, we talked about that a little bit earlier, cannibalize any potential revenue, services revenue that might come from that. So they picked an industry vertical where they didn't have a lot of existing customers to test their product. So for them, it was pharmaceutical companies. And I think that is really important to think about, okay, what's the best market for us to test, not only in terms of where we might have the most traction, where there's the most need, but also where might we want to avoid immediate risk of cannibalization. Second example is if you're thinking about serving a new market. And certainly that has a lot of risk because it's a market where you may not have brand awareness, you may not have certainly existing customer relationships. And so that's another great point of thinking about where might you want to pilot in areas that are least likely to disrupt, but also will require the least amount of investment. And I think this is, we talked in the beginning about generative AI being one of the drivers of productization strategies for a lot of the organizations that we work with. And I think this is another area to emphasize the importance of having hypotheses about our go-to-market strategy, quickly testing those hypotheses, and then adjusting. And this is coming up with organizations who perhaps in the past have priced based on time and materials and are now starting to use AI to deliver, or at least deliver partially some of the work that humans had done in the past, thus lowering the amount of time that's required. And so these organizations are having to quickly iterate and experiment how they evolve their pricing over time. So do they go to value-based pricing? Do they go to hybrid pricing? Do they just increase their hourly rates for their people, for their professionals to account for the increased cost of technology? And the answer is, what are your hypotheses? How can you quickly test them and then iterate based on what you learned, as opposed to expecting that you're going to get it right out of the gate? And for a lot of organizations, this can be very uncomfortable to think about doing this as a test and learn process, something that's really iterative, but it is the most effective way in order to quickly get market feedback and adjust accordingly. So big important finding that we certainly want to make sure that we share. And again, I think, we're somewhat to blame for this because when we first talked about this in the productized pathway in our first book, Productize, we really showed the launch phase as something that happens after product development. But the truth is that it starts early and it's very iterative. So should be evolving alongside your product as well. Finding number 2, and this may be no surprise for those of you who've tried this, it's very hard for doer sellers and services sellers to effectively sell products. So you may be at a B2B services organization right now that has a dedicated sales force or more of an agency model where you have account directors, account managers who are the primary kind of face to the clients. And that's great. That certainly means it's going to be a little bit easier for you as you think about introducing products to adapt. But I will also say that assuming that services sellers can effectively sell products is a mistake and is one where we've been able to see many organizations struggle with that assumption. So look at the quote on the left-hand side. It's harder for consultants to sell products than you probably realize. Selling at scale is just so different. And we talked about that a little bit before. Again, when you're selling services, you're focusing a lot on diagnosis and inspiring confidence that you have the people and the skills in order to deliver on that specific customer's needs. When you're selling products, it's very different. So you can see here on the right-hand side some of the compare and contrast. Again, when you're doing product sales, you're really focused on kind of value-based selling versus cost plus, an ability to demonstrate that product value in the sales process. There may be demos. You also, if you're trying to get after that recurring revenue that everyone who took the benchmarking survey said they want, you also need to focus on renewal and expansion sales and setting the expectation in the initial sales process that there will be a renewal and opportunities for expansion. Versus on the other side, you've got a technical buyer that may be involved. You've got less customization, deal flexibility, and often higher volume. So those are some of the things that I think are really important to think about as we're thinking about what's the right level of investment that we want in our sales team. What types of resources do we have to put in place in order to ensure that they're successful? Do we need to bring in new capabilities? And what is the right way to stage investment in those capabilities as we learn more about whether or not we have product market fit? One of the things that we did find in the research certainly is that your sales strategy will vary depending on your product strategy. So what you can see here on this slide are the 4 different ways that typically B2B professional services firms are productizing. Starting with the far left-hand side, standardizing and tech-enabling delivery of services. That is mostly where we're seeing organizations start. So the client may still feel like it's a very customized service, but you've standardized how projects are configured, how the work is done. You're using more and more technology to do the work that previously professionals have done. And with that strategy, there's usually very little change to your go-to-market approach. But when you get into box number 2 there, where you're bundling products and services, then you start to see a significant change in how you go to market. Because again, as I talked about in the previous page, you have kind of different skills that you need and a different process that you might be following when you're starting to talk about a product. If there's a software component, again, a technical buyer may need to get involved. Certainly, there's an expectation that there's going to be a demo. And if you're trying to do that with services, you need to be able to talk about the value of the entire solution. Certainly, if you go over to box number 3, kind of moving across the page, where you're building a new products business, that actually starts to be a little bit easier. So there's usually more upfront investment required because you're having to bring in a whole new set of skills, but it's very clean. You can usually hire professionals who've worked, at product native, tech native organizations, ring fence that team. If they are selling into existing customers, you have to think through the coordination of that. But if they're selling to new market segments, then you don't have to think about that at all. And then number 4, fully productizing, sunsetting services. That is obviously a change management challenge. You are usually building an entire team from scratch and not relying on your previous sales and marketing capabilities, but there needs to be a bridge, and that can be tricky as well. So one of the things, in addition to customizing your commercialization strategy based on the maturity of your product, whether you're pre-revenue, revenue, scaling, and so on, that's obviously very important, but you also need to customize your commercialization strategy based on your productization strategy. And again, using these 4 different archetypes as a way to think through that can be very, very helpful. Next finding we found, going through these quickly, is that your pricing and packaging also depends on your product strategy. So in addition to your sales strategy depending on your product strategy, your pricing will also depend on your product strategy. And so you can see, on the page, some of the questions you want to think through. Certainly on the left, are you pricing a new standalone product? Again, is it bundled? Is it complementary? Is it a price increase over something that your customers have already had? And then also, what are your strategic goals? So oftentimes what we see organizations who are relatively immature in their productization journey assume is that their product that they're launching will be self-funding within a very short time period, will certainly returning the investment shortly thereafter, and will start to significantly change the margin structure that they have. But they haven't yet thought through really what is the goal as they think about kind of the entire organization that the product sits in. So is it just to maximize product revenue, in which case you would want to think about time to revenue, time to return on investment, time to starting to seriously restructure what your margins look like for your company? Or is it a loss leader for your services? Is it to maximize adoption or match variable demand, enter a new segment, maximize retention of existing customers? There are a lot of other goals that you may want to think through, and that will also influence how you think about pricing. And again, this is where this makes this much more nuanced and complex for B2B services firms who are productizing. If you were a product native, tech native company, especially if you were just starting out, a startup, for example, you would be asking much more straightforward pricing questions than you would when you're thinking about how does the price of your product or productized service influence everything else that you're selling. So thinking about that, what's written there in the box at the bottom is really important, which is for services businesses, we have to think about how it supports other offerings, as well as our current positioning and our brand in the marketplace. And that leads to, I think, one thing that doesn't get discussed enough, and we go into this a lot in the book, is really thinking about how we might be going to market with these as a bundle. So rather than a separate products business, a separate services business, how do we go to market as a bundled solution? And I think when this is done well, and certainly the research has borne this out, this approach of going to market with a bundled solution can really act like rocket fuel for your business and provide a significant competitive advantage. So when we think about products that complement our services and put them into attractive packages that offer better value or convenience to the customer, that can be incredibly powerful. Bundling can also encourage things like trialing a new product. It can increase the stickiness of your offerings. Certainly, if there's an ongoing maintenance product, that can increase the stickiness in your relationship with the organization. It opens up cross-sell opportunities. So again, the longer we can keep that relationship, the more we can spot those cross-sell opportunities, which then allows us to leverage our existing relationships, our sales channels, and so on. So a lot of reasons, which you can see here on the page, to think about, as we're going to market and creating the strategy for this, not thinking about those product and productized services not as a separate business, but as a bundled solution that we go to market with our services. And again, that's going to require iteration and trial and error. We are not going to get it right out of the gate. But I think this is something that we're uniquely positioned to do. And again, when done well, this can offer substantial competitive advantage, not only against your services peers, but also against pure products companies that don't have the relationships, the existing services capabilities, or brand recognition that you have. All right, last finding is that subscription pricing does not equal recurring revenue. So a failure point that we see for most organizations who are new to productization is, as you saw in the benchmarking data, you want those products to be renewable, you want that recurring revenue. But a lot of organizations, unfortunately, just don't plan for it, both in design of the product as well as design of their go-to-market strategy. And that's because we're just conditioned to think, based on projects. We have kind of a project-based mindset, consulting-based mindset. Where's the next project? Versus in a recurring revenue business, we're thinking more about how do we fulfill what we just sold in a way that they want to renew and grow the relationship. So, part of it's mindset and culture. You may also have a compensation system that's built around projects, and that can also get in the way. So when we talk about and outline this in the research, how do we make sure that these products are renewable, and making sure that renewability is a key part of our commercialization strategy? We really have to think about the things that you see here on the page. So one, how are we building value over time to make sure that the product gets more valuable the more they use it and the more people in the organization that use it? Are we making adequate investments in customer success? So again, this is often, it needs to be a key part of your business case when you're making go, no-go decisions on new product investments, but it's often something that we see not included or massively underinvested in as a functionality that's needed to ensure renewability. We need to know, third, what are the retention predictors? So how will we know either based on usage, based on time of usage, based on who's using, whether or not a customer is likely to renew? Fourth, are we organizing for multi-year deals? So are we offering that up front as an option as we're discussing this with potential customers? Are we outlining what the vision looks like for usage year over year? All of those, I think, are very important considerations. And then finally, orienting the organization around long-term, customer lifetime value. And I mentioned compensation and performance incentives perhaps not being aligned is one of the reasons why we don't have the renewability that we want. We think, obviously this takes time, but the more that we can do to start talking about customer lifetime value as opposed to revenue in this year, the more that we will start to shift our thinking and think about renewability and get that lovely recurring revenue that everyone says that they want. So those are some of the key findings. Certainly would love to know if anyone has any questions. Feel free to put those in the chat. And while you're doing that, I just want to let you know there are a couple ways that you can contribute or certainly get involved. So if you have any lessons learned the hard way around your commercialization or go-to-market of new products, would love to talk to you, as well as any success stories. And also, we are convening go-to-market roundtables specifically for services leaders who are charged with go-to-market for new offerings, and a place where they can exchange ideas and shape future support. So there's a QR code there that you're welcome to use if you want to get in touch to talk about either one of those. And I'll see if there are any questions that we have either on LinkedIn or here in the chat. Okay, here's one. What was the discussion around building product roadmaps, which help build relationships and multi-year deals? Okay, so good question, Carla. Thank you for that. So one of the things that we found in the research is, and this gets to, you don't want to, you want to build value over time. So thinking about, for example, how might an organization, as they're using the product, provide data to you that you can then use to make the product more valuable over time. Great example of this is, let's say, Netflix, for example. The more you use Netflix, the more you watch it, the more data it gets about what you like, what you don't like, perhaps, if you're reviewing shows that you don't like. And then it can provide you with smarter recommendations over time. So very simple B2C example, but that's one where as you're thinking about your product roadmap, you're thinking about, okay, how does that product become more valuable over time? And what are things that we can do to get more information, perhaps, from our customers that will add to the value? The other thing that's important is thinking about, especially with multi-year deals, is not just pricing, but ability to, certainly there's usually some type of incentive around pricing, but also the ability to shape the product roadmap. So you could have arrangements with customers who are multi-year customers, enter into multi-year deals, that they'll be part of your customer advisory board, for example, who are helping to shape that product roadmap over time. Or they may get exclusive access to new beta features, for example. That's another great way to think about that. So lots of ways that you can leverage your product development, leverage building your product roadmap to encourage those relationships. Let's see, other question. How do you sell a product that is a general solution, but have it still feel for customers like it meets them where they are and overcomes that but we're unique objection? Are you seeing any of the AI advancements helping here? So, okay, good question. I'll answer the first part. So this is where we talk about different sales skills. So when you are selling a product, typically what you are doing is educating the customer on why the product is the best solution to the problem they have. And that may involve reframing what they think the problem is, or reframing how they think the best way to solve it might be. So there's usually a little bit of opportunity to teach or challenge, change the mind of the customer about what the best solution is. Now, I also mentioned bundled solutions, the but we're unique objection. So this is often, and especially when an organization is kind of maturing into productization, they will still include some services. And honestly, many product organizations do this as well, to allow for some customization if they think it's needed. Ideally, though, however, as you're maturing, what you're doing is you're identifying different um, buying personas, different market segments, and you are configuring, not customizing, but configuring the product based on how that customer segment might be unique. So you may have more finer segmentation, but there's a different configuration of the product for segment A than there is for segment B. And again, this takes a while. That's why this is a very iterative approach. But over time, as you learn more about the market segments and their needs and their unique objections, you can develop different configurations. Again, some of those may include services as part of the bundle to meet those, quote unquote, unique needs. But it's unique, compared to the large market segment. But you've got a smaller market segment where their uniqueness is all the same, so the configuration can be the same. Are you seeing any of the AI advancements helping here? It's not, to be honest, an area where I've done a lot of research yet, but certainly if other people on the line have done that, would love to talk to you. All right, Judy asks, in the situation we're considering commercialization after product development, what's the best strategy to make sure it's successful? Okay, so you thought about commercialization after product development, very, very common mistake. First one is to go back, Judy, to all that initial market research that you did, hopefully did, when you were developing the product. So identifying what's the urgent and expensive customer problem, who has that problem, and how that problem is currently being solved, and what might some of the gaps be in the current solutions that your new product could solve. So going back to that work is usually step one. Step two may be then going in and augmenting that research and really getting that deep market understanding that I talked about when I laid out the different components of a commercialization strategy. It has to start with market understanding. Then, because you already have a product, you can do in-market tests. So going back to that finding that I talked about, the importance of iteration, what are the hypotheses you have about your go-to-market strategy, and how can you quickly test those hypotheses having real conversations with real prospects, or launching real marketing campaigns, going after again, real market segments, doing different pricing tests, again, in real life. And I would say, Judy, that's fantastic, because nothing is going to tell you more whether or not your hypothesis is valid or invalid than how a customer responds to a real request to pay for a value proposition that you've put in front of them. So those are some places that I would start, Judy. Okay, Dennis, do you see a lot of B2B professional services companies trying to both standardize and tech-enable delivery of services and bundle products and services? Yes, absolutely. So when I outlined those 4 different strategies, let's see if I can go back to those. Yeah, here we are. These are not necessarily ones that are done just one at a time. So typically organizations will start by standardizing and tech enabling the delivery of their services, and then they will move to bundling products and services. But they're still thinking about how they can standardize and tech enable the delivery of any existing services that they maintain. They may also decide that there's a new market segment that they've never pursued in the past that they want to pursue, and launch a new products business to go after that market segment at the same time that they're keeping their existing business, so they're not sunsetting. So you could see 1, 2, and 3 happening in organizations, and certainly we work with many clients who are doing all 3 of those. Good question, Dennis. Thank you. All right, let's see how we're doing on time. Oh, great. Okay, good. Another question. In the iterative approach to commercialization and go to market, Where would you recommend starting? Is there a first experiment test that you love most? Yes. So the place that you want to start is validating the urgent and expensive customer problem that you're solving. That is most important, and it's why we talked about it so much in Productize as the first step that you have to take before you develop a product. It is also the most important thing for commercialization. So validating that you've got the right customer problem and that you're articulating it using language that they would use. So typically the way that I'll do that is ask, what are your goals for this year? Okay. What are your challenges to meeting those goals? Okay. All right. Now within this specific area, what is it that you find most difficult? So really validating that we've got the right problem. Next, if you have the right problem, the next thing that you want to validate is the opportunity to solve that problem in a new and different way. So that's where competitive analysis is helpful. That's where talking to customers about how they're currently solving the problem. Would they spend money to solve the problem? How much have they spent in the past? That you start to bleed into kind of willingness to pay, but you're trying to identify, is there a gap in how they're currently solving the problem? Because again, that's going to be incredibly important in your messaging, in your value proposition, and then as you start to think about pricing and packaging as well. Great. Okay, another question. Our product is going to be bundled with a really big solution. We don't really have the option for hiring a different sales force. Have you seen organizations succeeding in educating the existing sellers to successfully sell the product component as part of the sales? Oh goodness, are there ways to get them behind it? I've seen them succeed to a point. I have not seen them succeed to the expectations of the leadership team for the investment in the product to have been deemed worth it. Just being honest here. So the first thing I would do is think about, is there a subset of your sales force who is really excited about this? Maybe they've been involved in the product development process. Maybe they've demonstrated strong expertise at other companies, like maybe they came from a products company and have sold products in the past, and work with them as a subset first to, one, help them work out all the kinks in your positioning, even your packaging, your sales playbook, but also to get some early wins. Because if the rest of the sales team can see those early wins, they're going to be less skeptical of it and more open to then wanting to build the new skills. Remember, we talked about, this requires both new skills, but also follow the new processes that are going to be required. I mean, people don't like change. So you're going to have to show that the change is going to be worth it, which then leads to a second thing, which is compensation structure. And we didn't talk about that today, but that is a big part of the chapter on the sales team, is making sure that you've got the right compensation structure. And so that could be doing everything from decreasing commission on services, increasing commission on products. If it's sold as a bundled solution, making sure that the solution includes the right mix of services and products. Lots of different ways to get creative here, but that's another way, in addition to the success stories from their peers who've started selling it early, to get them on board. That said, again, it is very rare to be able to do this successfully without starting to bring in some new blood and some new skills. Now, good thing is a lot of our sales forces have turnover. And so as salespeople are turning over, we can tweak the profile that we're looking for and find people who are used to selling more of a bundled solution, used to products. The last thing I need to mention is then the importance of traditional sales engineers, product support, whatever you want to call it, where you've got dedicated resources from the product team who can do the demos, answer the questions, the more technical questions, can help support the sellers who are perhaps more used to selling services and don't yet have the skills or ability to follow the new processes perhaps a sales engineer product support could. So yeah, lots of different ways to address this. It's got to be multifaceted. It has to include the early success, the comp change, the support, and then eventually thinking about how you start to bring in new skills. Great questions, folks. Really glad we had the time for this. I think we do have a few more minutes if there are any more. Nope, one new message. Here we go. No more questions. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I hope this was useful. Again, book will be out later this spring. And if you want to share any horror stories, success stories, anything like that, I'll show the QR code one more time. There you go. Please get in touch. Thanks, everyone. Bye.